with comedian Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. So Bitcoin is making new all-time highs. It's floating around 107. $107,365 to be exact. Now, that is good, but it's about to get fucking wild because Bitcoin game theory is coming into play. So, let me just explain a little bit about what potentially could be coming up. This isn't my own theory. This has been patched together through listening to Luke Groman, Jeff Booth, Michael Saylor, people like that. So at the moment, the US is currently, I think it is 36 or 37 trillion. That's not billion, that's trillion dollars in debt. Now, if you don't know what a trillion is, I suggest you go on the internet now and you look up the visual of what $1,000 looks like, what $100,000 looks like, what a million looks like, 10 million, 100 million, billion, trillion. The size difference. And then once you've seen a trillion, then imagine 36 of those. And then imagine you have to pay back those $36 trillion. And then you'll realize how absolutely impossible it is just to pay it back. So when you realize that it's impossible to pay back, there's two options. You've only really seriously got two options. Default on the debt, which is we're not paying the debt back. And usually when a country can print their own money, there's no need for them to default. And a default would seize all the capital markets. It would cause deflation and the whole entire system would collapse pretty quickly. Unless there was a huge injection of cash, which would make the 2008 bailout seem like chump change. So default, probably not going to happen. The other thing you can do is inflate the debt away. Now, I'm not too sure if people fully understand what that means. When you inflate the debt away, you make your currency weaker. So basically, you're talking about printing money. So you can do that in a couple of ways. You can just fucking print the money, which makes the debt easier to pay back. If you're just printing money, it causes inflation, obviously. That's the whole point. You're inflating the debt away, so you're expanding the money supply to make the debt less. So if you're printing trillions of dollars, the money becomes worthless, but the debt becomes less of a burden. You understand what I mean? That comes with a lot of problems, though. You can't just print money and throw it into the system. You've got to inflate against something. So they've done this a couple of times in American history. So I think it was in 1933, and I think it was Franklin Roosevelt, Frankie D. Roosevelt, during the Great Depression, signed Executive Order 6102, which confiscated all the gold. So they took all the gold off the people, or they got them to hand it in. They didn't go around with guns and steal it, but people went in, handed in their gold. I think they bought it back for $12 an ounce or something. Once everyone had handed in their gold, the government immediately repriced gold at a higher price. So let's say they bought the gold back at $12. Overnight, they changed the price to $24, which is a 100% debasement of the currency against gold. You won't really feel that in the economy. It won't affect the price of eggs, but if you want to use your currency to buy gold, then effectively your currency is worth 100% less than it was the night before. So that's a way you can inflate away the debt. You get me? Is that making sense yet? Because I don't know. It's a little bit complicated, but it's very simple as well. So let's say you had $1 million in debt and you have $1 million in gold at the current prices. You would lose all your gold if you paid back the debt. But if you doubled the price of the gold by government mandate, then you could pay back the entire debt and still keep half your gold. That's what inflating the debt away is. And if you quadruple the value of gold, then what was $250,000 worth of gold yesterday is now $1 million worth of gold. So you sell $1 million worth of gold, pay off the debt, and you've still got 3/4 of your gold left. You understand what I mean? Anyway, the US also did that with oil in the 70s. Henry Kissinger made a deal with, I think it was Saudi Arabia, and overnight the oil prices went from $3 to $12. That weakened the US dollar as well, but also that's a little bit complex because it also backed up the US dollar and oil was stronger, and that's when the US became the petrodollar. Anyway, that's not important. Let's talk about what's happening now. So the US is in 37, let's call it 37. It will be 37 in no time if it's not 37 now. $37 trillion in debt. So they can only default or inflate it away. Now, they're going to have to inflate it away. So they can't just print money, throw it into the system. That will cause insane inflation. Fucking prices of eggs will become $450 per egg. There'll be riots in the street. You can't do it that way. They can do it by repricing gold. So the Fed has a mandate where they can reprice gold to protect the currency. Now, they could do that. But the problem with doing that, and this is where all the game theory comes in, if they took gold from 2,000, I think it's 2,700 an ounce at the moment, USD. If they took it from 2,700 to $27,000 an ounce, that would wipe out significant amounts of the debt. And they could do that. The US has the most gold in the world. The only problem with doing that is the BRICS nations, Russia, China, and especially India, especially those three countries, have spent the last 10 years stockpiling gold, just buying it by the ton. So if the US overnight cranks up the price of gold, they're not only inflating away a lot of their debt, but they are making all those countries much, much wealthier. So those countries that have been stockpiling gold are gonna like 10x. So you would hesitate. If you were the US, you would hesitate before you were gonna make your enemies stronger. Now, the other option is what Trump seems to be talking about, a strategic Bitcoin reserve, where you just print $1 trillion and buy Bitcoin with it, sending Bitcoin to the fucking moon, buying as much of the Bitcoin supply as they possibly can, then paying back the debt pretty much with the Bitcoin. Like if the US bought $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin in January, then it will just be an arms race between the biggest nations in the world on who will get the most Bitcoin, and that $1 trillion will turn into fucking $10-20 trillion pretty fucking quickly. And what Michael Saylor has been saying, if you really want to hurt your enemies, if you really want to defeat your enemies, sell all the gold in Fort Knox, buy Bitcoin with it, which will plummet the price of gold down to almost zero, and send Bitcoin, God knows how much it will be. But these things are happening, and they're happening now. And for Bitcoin at the moment to be $107,000, and there's been no real hoopla about it at all, what I think is happening is one of these countries like Russia, it's definitely not India. India don't give a fuck about Bitcoin, which is going to be one of their big downfalls. It could be China. China's pretty on the ball with it, but I think it might be Russia. Putin's talked about Bitcoin multiple times. So I think it might be Russia preempting Trump's Bitcoin reserve, strategic Bitcoin reserve, and is just on a buying spree at the moment. Because retail's not in yet. There's some big companies buying, but the price action is a little bit strange. Anyway, this is the Bitcoin game theory that's playing out as we speak. If Trump just did that, there's a possibility, there's a very real possibility Trump may accidentally save America. I don't think he'll even really know he's doing it. But if he does that, he'll put America on the path to greater things, that's for sure. And Bitcoin has this ability to change you. So I reckon, like, if you've got 1 million Bitcoin and you see what it does, then you're like, all right, this is something different here. Anyway, this is all going to be playing out over the next 6 months. But there's really, game theory-wise, there's no real alternative for the US. They have to buy Bitcoin. It's almost they have to do it. They've got no other option unless they start like a giant war. That's the only other option. And for fuck's sake, I hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, I hope I explained that well enough to understand at least. But yeah, that'll do for tonight, and I'll see you the fuck later.